July 1st, 2020. Today's chapter is called Ashes to Ashes. But first, let's start with a reading from Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River Anthology, a play I appeared in college. And let's just go almost right to the beginning. And if you remember this play, the characters reveal themselves in soliloquies. And in the beginning, we hear from the hill. Where are Elmer, Herman, Bert, Tom, and Charlie, the weak of will, the strong of arm, the clown, the boozer, the fighter? All are sleeping on the hill. One passed in a fever, one was burned in a mine, one was killed in a brawl, one died in jail, one fell from a bridge toiling for children and wife, and all are sleeping on the hill. All right, let's get to this story. Ashes to Ashes. A woman and man dressed in long black coats walked up the driveway while a third person waited in the car. Ignoring the sign, "Do not ring bell, doctor's orders," they pushed the button and the chime triggered a moan from Sheila. Paul opened the door. "Good morning. We're visiting your neighborhood, bringing good news." "Our dog just died," said Paul, closing the door on the Jehovah's Witnesses before they could cite scripture on the raising of Lazarus. They walked to their car, kicked dust off their heels, and drove down the mountain. Sheila, always polite to guests, remembered Paul's rudeness to the witnesses when they returned exactly 1 year later, the anniversary of Bluey's death, believing it was a sign, and eagerly opened the door. "Do you have a message from my dog?" "We have a message for you from God." "Isn't that the same?" Paul carried the limp corpse outside to the terrace as residual throw-up leaked from his mouth. Sheila heated water on the stove, mixed it outside with rainwater in a bucket to the right temperature, and washed crusty vomit from their lion's mane, face, and snout. Paul raised Bluey's hindquarters, and Sheila took a clean washcloth, dipped it into the warm water, and scrubbed the dried poop from his wiggle butt and fresh soft cream that emerged. Paul poured water over his rear, rinsing him as gently as Kate and Alex at 4 months old. They patted him dry with a towel, brushed his calico blue-tinged fur. Then Sheila blow-dried his locks to make sure he didn't catch cold. Paul spread the royal blue blanket over the Persian rug, remembering the indoor tents he made from blankets as a child. Sheila slit open plastic wrapping of new white sheets and spread one over the blanket where Paul lowered Bluey for his final nap. Sheila cut blooms from orchids and purple wisteria and placed them around the body. Paul stepped outside and was greeted by orange birds of paradise standing tall with teardrops of sap in their eyes, kissed by floating hummingbirds. "Excuse me," he said, snipping the base of each stem. "This is for Bluey." With flowers in his left arm, he walked to a bush of Provence lavender unsinged by fire and cut a handful of sprigs as hummingbirds circled above. He carried his offerings to Bluey's bed, adorned with as many petals as a tournament of roses parade float, complete with a bottle of Merlottage wine and a handful of corks, as Birdie looked from the bed's edge. Paul cut fresh Kelly green shoots from bud-breaking vines and blooming roses and placed these on the bier. With tears in their eyes and heavy hearts, the couple gazed upon their child, Bluey looking so peaceful after so much suffering. It would have brought a lump to your throat, too, if you could have seen him lying there with that Aussie smile on his lips. Then Sheila sang, "Beautiful boy, beautiful boy, Mama loves you, beautiful boy." And the couple wailed at her horribly off-key melody. Cheeky, the flicker, was so distraught when he saw Bluey laying in state, he flew into a glass pane, snapping his neck. "I'll bury them together," said Paul. When the wave of tears passed, Paul asked, "Shall I carry him to the grave?" "Are you kidding?" said Sheila. "I'm not going to bury my beautiful boy in dirt. The ground is cold." "Do you want him incinerated, so he'll be warm forever?" "Yes, I'll spread half his ashes under his favorite bougainvillea and half at Dog Beach. What are we going to do with that big pit in the ground? You can fill it yourself. Paul, not looking for a fight, telephoned a pet cemetery with a crematorium. How much does he weigh? The manager asked. Why do you ask? Small dogs cost less. He's lost a lot of weight, said Paul. The last time I checked, he was 32 pounds. That will save you $100 since he's under 40 pounds. This is the first time that dog ever saved me money. If you want to save money, a group cremation costs less. How much is the private one? Paul asked. I don't want a group cremation, Sheila interjected. You have to go there and watch and make sure you bring me back Bluey's ashes. I don't want my dog's ashes mixed with other dogs. They said their goodbyes, and Paul wrapped Bluey in white sheets, then wrapped the cocoon inside the royal blue blanket. He carried the bundle to the car without any leaks and wondered, if stopped by the police, how am I going to explain the dead body? Bluey loved the car, and they went for their last ride. Paul stopped by his office to put out some fires. And he parked in the shade and kept the windows cracked open so Bluey's spirit could escape, if lingering. When he returned an hour later, the car's inside temperature was warm, and Paul noticed an off odor, reminding him of rotting mice. He brought a few wine bottles to tip the furnace operator, but the manager said the staff were enrolled in a 12-step program and didn't need this pourboire. Does working in a crematorium drive you to drink, or does the work attract people with demons? Private cremations were done on Saturday, and it was Monday, so Bluey's mummy was placed in cold storage. When Paul returned home, he found 2 boxes from Amazon on the porch, the baby carriage and harness. 5 days later, Sheila and Paul drove to the pet cemetery, and the manager presented them with options. Would you like the cremains in a bag or this cedar box? I want that, said Sheila, pointing to an urn of polished Italian marble. They had kept the corpse in a refrigerator, not a freezer, and when they rolled him out on a gurney for a final goodbye, Sheila noticed the aromatic profile of a gopher left 5 days in a trap. Bluey, you stink, she said, pinching her nose. She placed Birdie and Snacks by his side, and they paid their last respects and wrung another tear. Paul accompanied Bluey to the oven, placing Birdie, fresh wisteria, and a cork on top of the royal blue blanket as flames flared and the furnace door slowly descended. People say hot days and cool nights make for great wine, but in February? At least the unusually warm weather made it easier on Bluey, who spent his last days outside in the sun. Did guardian angels keep rain from San Diego so Bluey could be warm and dry? Did a dog cause California's drought? The prayers of the people were answered. The clouds opened, seasonal rains and cooler temperatures returned. Paul thought they were going to spread their cremains, but now they needed a spot for the urn. They agreed to a place of honor on the matching marble top of Victor Hugo's desk in the living room that overlooked the spot Bluey spent his final days. The top of the desk became a memorial shrine as Sheila set candles on both sides of the urn. She placed fresh flowers and a plate of treats, changed his water, cooked him a meal, and lit candles every evening. As condolence cards arrived from neighbors and admirers, Sheila read them aloud to her dog and placed them in the shrine. Paul, who initially opposed the urn, grew to like it too. Each night, the ritual continued, she cooking a Thanksgiving meal of Bluey's favorite dishes, talking to her dog, her voice cracking, tears flowing. When you talk to your dog's ashes, does he know it's his 12th birthday? I saw Bluey the night he died, Sheila told Paul. He's an angel and flew to heaven. She believed Bluey was more than just a dog, while Paul said, what's dead is dead. For him, life went on without his companion. Sheila, on the other hand, prepared Bluey's food each night, changed his water bowl, and said prayers for his souls. There were days she spotted him under a tree, keeping watch over the vines, and nights flying around her room. When Paul returned from work each evening, Sheila asked him to take Bluey for a run. "He's here. Look at the candle," she said, pointing to the dancing flame. In the mornings, she asked Paul to take him for a walk. "After how many weeks talking to your dead dog, are you certifiably crazy?" "Don't take Bluey's food," she snapped at Paul when he pinched a bite from Bluey's filet mignon. Navigating Sheila's rules of mourning became a minefield. If you ate the lamb chop cooked for your dead dog, is his ghost angry? Paul received a text from his winery co-op, informing him he was cut from their shared tasting room because his sales were down, a result of him taking care of his dog and neglecting co-op business. Kick a guy while he's down on his luck, thought Paul. Brother, can you spare some wine? Is this the beginning of Death of a Salesman, Winemaker's Edition? After 40 days of mourning, Sheila announced, "I want to bury Bluey's urn." "Why should we bury it now?" asked Paul, who had grown accustomed to the urn. "If we don't bury him, he can't go to heaven." "But you said you saw him fly to heaven already." "Why are you always against me?" "Sorry." "Let's bury him, and if we ever move, we can dig up the urn and take him with us." Kate flew down from San Francisco, where she had moved, and Alex took a day of leave from Camp Pendleton to join the family. When Kate walked into the house, she burst into heavy sobs the moment she saw Bluey's memorial altar illuminated by candlelight. 3 minutes later, she was merrily chatting away, telling her parents she had weaved material about Bluey into a stand-up comedy routine for an upcoming open mic night. Will she mourn for me more than 3 minutes when I die? Paul wondered. Probably not. "Dad, can we get another dog?" Kate asked in the morning. Paul ignored her question and walked out of the house to rake leaves and blow off steam, to avoid saying to her face, "I think we need another daughter." The last time Paul carried Bluey up the hill with the family, it was Christmas and Sheila sang Beautiful Boy off key. This time, Paul carried his ashes in the urn, with each step remembering the cross he bore. Over 3 months had passed since they dug his grave, and Sheila asked Kate to jump in and remove the dried leaves from avocado trees blown inside. "Why, Mama?" "Because they're dirty." "Isn't the dirt dirty?" "Why argue with her?" Paul counseled his daughter, and jumped into the pit with Alex to pick up the leaves where Kate joined them. They stepped out and started shoveling dirt into the hole, and whenever a leaf blew back inside, one of them stepped in to pick it up. Sheila emptied a Santa-sized sack of corks to cover the urn, and Paul and Alex shoveled dirt over the corks. Next, Paul and Alex picked up rocks and dug up boulders and placed them along the edge of the grave. "Don't step on Bluey's head!" Sheila exclaimed, as Alex and Paul poured bags of white marble gravel over the grave, raking them level to convey the serenity of a Japanese Buddhist rock garden. Paul read the Liturgy for the Dead from the church's Book of Common Prayer. Then Alex's buddy, who accompanied him from the base, lifted his trumpet and played taps. Sheila set out a spread of smoked salmon, fresh fruit, and granola bars for the dog. Kate placed a plate of stuffed grape leaves she made from Bluey's vines on a rock next to the headstone, while Paul, Alex, and his buddy walked to the Protea garden to cut yellow and orange pincushions they placed in a white bucket by the gravesite. Although the urn was buried outside, Sheila kept a velvet pouch of Bluey's remaining cremains inside the house atop the altar, where she offered a plate of food and glass of wine by candlelight each evening. When vineyard dogs go to heaven, do they gorge on chocolate and grapes? The death of the dog was the death of the drought. As Bluey slept with his fathers, dormant vines, mimicking death, awoke and sucked water into their arteries to quench their thirst. Spring followed winter's darkness. The vine's life cycle continued, and new life budded, then burst. When shoots reached the top of the wire, it was time to get them sprayed to prevent powdery mildew that could ruin the crop, the last vintage in which Bluey had a paw because he supervised pruning. Paul made arrangements to hire another vineyard manager to spray because Sheila couldn't stand Miguel. "Why didn't you tell me you hired someone else? I want to use Miguel," she protested. This from the woman who accused him of being a thief, drunk on the job, a scoundrel. Was this the beginning of a reconciliation between the old man of the vines and the queen of the vineyard? She had been hospitalized because of high blood pressure. So had he. She had damaged a knee and had it repaired from surgery. He was about to receive that gift, and there were unforeseen pain they would share. They say in your life, there's one special dog, and for Sheila and Paul, Bluey was theirs, although for Sheila, he was still with her. A vineyard without a dog is a marine without a rifle, and though Bluey loved the vacuum cleaner, nature abhors a vacuum and will fill it. About another dog, never say never, said Paul, for whom it was a time of reflection, to imagine the fullness of time, when the hole in his heart might be filled with a new soulmate. He was grateful for the good life he'd had, adventures, planting a vineyard, growing vines, and dreaming of going 0 to naked in 1.2 bottles of wine, for neighbors Merlot Mac, Cougar Carrion, Steph and John, and even Joe the Wino, and for the good times, the harvest, and even a presidential visit. He had survived the Great Recession and the Great Fire. He was a survivor and would get by, some way, somehow. What he faced was nothing compared to the struggles of others. As his life flashed before his eyes, he thought of Rachel, my first love, meeting Sheila in France. What happened to us? Jane, save me a dance in our next life. Marcy, oh, the beauty of youth, how I long to hold you in my arms, and of one who once had been so real, now a faded memory. Dare he say it? If he uttered her name, would she miraculously appear from 7,500 miles afar? Christine, oh Christine, what if we had married? When he recalled the loves of his life, his best memories were of a dog and his smile, and how he and Bluey fished for gophers, and the dog swallowed rotten ones, but not the corks he begged to chew, the dog who snuck grapes and survived and licked spilled wine, the dog who wouldn't release a gopher carcass one day, but brought him a lost baby bunny unharmed the next, the dog who made his master fetch, telling him to get his own newspaper each morning, the herding dog who steadfastly followed his lamb and kept him from losing his way, Bluey, who suffered stoically with dignity and smiled to his final breath. The vines grew and sang songs, and from the first Tempranillo grapes harvested without Bluey's oversight, they made a blush wine, and it was the best in the world. If you don't believe me, ask anyone who tasted it. The scent sommelier said it changed her life forever and couldn't find words to describe how good it was. Even Paul, rarely at a loss for words, could only describe it as, this is really good, as he and Sheila tried to outmaneuver the other for the last glass. As for the red, in October, Paul pulled a sample from the flex tank after malolactic fermentation and stirred the lees in a batonnage to impart richer mouthfeel. He had blended the higher acid Petit Syrah with low acid Tempranillo to lower the pH, balance the wine, and enhance the flavors, and it tasted like a little tempest, a wine to make San Diego and Bluey proud, his last hurrah. It was the best wine Paul had ever made, and he recorded his tasting experience on video and uploaded it to share with the world. On the first anniversary of Bluey's death, Paul left the reign of the vineyard and entered the winery and removed the cap from the tank to rack the wine into a new barrel, and was confronted with the smell of death. Carrion aggressively added sulfites, while Paul tried to use the minimum, didn't measure, underestimated, and paid. Without Bluey, Paul lost his winemaking way. Would he, could he, ever make good wine again? Each year, the anniversary of Bluey's death brought shortness of breath to his chest, and one year he noticed stomach pain to go with it, which he ignored as a symptom of mourning, even after all the years, remembering the dog who coughed his last breath in his arms. Paul's stomach discomfort continued the next day, and he thought it was from the local Mexican cuisine, and when it didn't pass, he thought it was indigestion from old age. Could there be something wrong with my stomach? Stop thinking like that, or your body will follow your thoughts and create an illness where there isn't one. So he ignored the signs and didn't call a doctor. Paul had periodic stomach pains since he was a kid, caused by hunger from staying out late playing soccer. But when he got home and drank a glass of milk and lay on his stomach, the discomfort ended. As an adult, stomach pains came from drinking watery coffee or too much espresso, and if he lay down, the discomfort vanished. So he drank a glass of milk and lay down so the pain would go away. But it didn't. The next morning, he peered into the toilet after moving his bowels, saw blood, and called the doctor. "Is it bright red or dark?" And after he answered dark, the nurse said, "You better come in." The doctor did an ultrasound. "It looks like you have a blockage. I'm not sure what it is. And there are lumps and gray matter on your pancreas. I don't like the looks of it. Let's get a CAT scan." And a specialist ran a number of tests and inserted a needle to take a biopsy. When Paul received the diagnosis, he remembered how Bluey barked every morning when he ground coffee beans, and wondered if the dog was warning him strong coffee was burning a hole in his gut. Was it that, or the oranges? His doctor said he should avoid oranges because of his blood type. When Paul asked why, the doctor said a byproduct of oranges breaking down in his system was a potential carcinogen. This was counterintuitive to Paul, who grew up believing oranges are good for you, and the good Lord had given him a magnificent plot of land on a mountainside with a pair of mature tangelo trees, and by the grace of God he would eat them. The doctor advised, if he persisted in eating oranges, to chew some walnuts with them. Paul ate the oranges with Bluey, tossing the peels in the compost, and he drank black viscous coffee. Did oranges kill Bluey? It's said people look like their dogs, but there's no rule saying you have to die like your dog. Paul came to realize how much pain Bluey had suffered, and through it all tried to bear it as well as he could, one day at a time, maintaining a sense of humor and a smile, just like his dog. Cholangiocarcinoma is a rare cancer of the bile duct, and at this stage it was pretty much inoperable as it had spread. So Paul could continue eating. The doctors inserted a stent to open his bile tract, and after a week at home before starting chemotherapy, a blood clot in his leg sent him back to the hospital. The clot moved to his lung, and his doctor said that was a good place for it to rest, and they battled it with blood thinners and prescribed painkillers. There's no need to recount the details of Paul's final days, because they had already been written about his dog. He fell in and out of consciousness with Kate and Alex at his side. They heard him mutter names they didn't know, one of them Christine. Agitated, he uttered from deep dreams, "I've got to thin the shoots," and "It's time to harvest. We have to pick the grapes before it's too late." As he struggled, Kate said, "Dad, don't worry, I'll pick the grapes for you. I promise." And the image of Kate working in the vineyard among the vines soothed him, that and the morphine. And there was something about the way she said, "I promise," that for the first time in his life he believed her, and was calmed knowing she would care for the vines, and he squeezed her hand, silently passing to her his blessing. As he settled down to sleep with his fathers, the last words they heard from his lips were, "Bluey, good boy," as he was reunited with his dog. After Paul's body was cremated, Kate spread half the ashes under his favorite vines, the ones given to him by Carrie Ann, and the rest she put into an urn. She dug through the dirt of Bluey's grave and reached a layer of corks. She pulled them out, dug deeper, and as she dug, dead leaves from a towering macadamia tree blew in the hole. She retrieved each leaf from the pit, placed her father's urn next to Bluey's and her mother's, and covered all three with corks, then dirt.